In our budget 4 years ago, we committed that by 2025, 1 in 10 cars sold in Canada would be electric. And then we got to work. We made sure that buying electric cars was more affordable. We invested in manufacturing and critical minerals, and now more Canadians are buying electric vehicles than ever before. We've reached our target 2 years ahead of schedule.
You might not see this coming, but Canada just pulled off a major EV deal that could change everything, and Tesla won't be happy about it. In a move that could reshape the industry, Canada is shifting its focus away from the US and looking toward Europe. And guess what? It's happening at the perfect time. Just a few years ago, Canada set an ambitious goal. By 2025, 1 in 10 cars sold should be electric. But in a shocking twist, they reached that milestone 2 years ahead of schedule. How? The government played a massive role. They rolled out incentives that made EVs more affordable, poured investments into local manufacturing, and secured deals to keep the supply chain strong. With automakers like Ford and GM setting up shop for EV production, Canada positioned itself as a key player in the global electric vehicle market. But just when it seemed like things were moving smoothly, an unexpected threat emerged. One that could change Canada's EV future entirely.
They think that they're going to sell those cars into the United States with no tax at the border. We're going to put a 100% tariff on every single car that comes across the line, and you're not going to be able to sell those cars. Everybody's going to be forced to buy an electric car, which they're not going to do because they don't want that. It's got a great market. It's got a market. It's really a sub-market. But they want everybody to have an electric car. We don't have enough electricity. We couldn't make enough electricity for that.
Former President Donald Trump has made one thing clear. If he returns to office, Canada's auto industry could face a major roadblock. He's proposing a 100% tariff on Canadian EVs and the metals used to build them. That means every electric car coming from Canada to the US could see its price double overnight. But it's not just about protecting American jobs. Trump argues that the US doesn't even have the power grid to handle a mass shift to EVs. According to him, people are being forced into buying electric vehicles, and he's pushing back hard. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. Instead of waiting to see how things play out, Canada is already making moves. If the US is going to make it harder to do business, then why not take their EV industry elsewhere? That's exactly what Canada is doing, turning to Europe for its next big trade partnership. And Tesla? It might just be one of the biggest losers in this shift. But what does this mean for the future of North American EVs? And how will Canada's retaliation shake things up? Stick around because things are about to get even more intense. For decades, Canada and the US have been deeply connected through trade, with over $900 billion exchanged between the two nations in 2023 alone. Canada sends about $350 billion in goods south of the border, and a huge chunk of that comes from the auto industry. More than 60% of Canada's vehicles are sold directly to American consumers, along with a massive supply of metals like steel and aluminum. So, what happens if Trump's 100% tariffs go into effect?
I always say tariffs is the most beautiful word to me in the dictionary. Because tariffs are going to make us rich as hell. It's going to bring our country's businesses back.
Right now, the US imports over 2 million Canadian-made vehicles every year. That's not just a statistic, it's the backbone of Canada's auto industry. If those cars suddenly cost double, American buyers will look elsewhere, and that could spell disaster for Canadian manufacturers. But it's not just cars at risk. The US relies heavily on Canadian steel and aluminum to build everything from vehicles to infrastructure. With tariffs in place, prices could skyrocket, hitting both industries hard on both sides of the border. For Canadian workers, this is a nightmare scenario. Job losses, factory closures, and economic uncertainty would ripple across the country. And for American consumers, prices on vehicles could soar, making the dream of owning an EV even more expensive. But here's the thing, Canada isn't waiting around to see how bad it gets. Instead, they're looking for new buyers, and the EU is stepping up. If Canada strengthens its ties with Europe, the US might find itself on the losing end of this trade war. Tesla, Ford, and GM, big names in the EV world, are all watching closely. If Canada locks in a solid EV trade deal with Europe, it could reshape the industry entirely. So, is this the beginning of a massive EV shift away from North America? And could Tesla's dominance be at risk?
Trudeau threatening Trump, the outgoing Canadian Prime Minister warning President Trump of immediate retaliation.
Elon Musk knows that Pierre Poilievre is his guy in Canada.
Tesla taking the biggest hit, down 6%. That's not the only.
Trump's 100% tariffs on Canadian EVs and metals aren't going unanswered. Canadian officials have made it clear. They won't back down without a fight. And their counterattack? Tesla. If the US follows through with tariffs, Canada is prepared to hit back with its own 100% tariff on Tesla vehicles. That means, overnight, Tesla's price in Canada could double, making it virtually impossible for many Canadians to afford one. It's not mere reprisal. There is a strategy involved. The chief American target for throwing mud being the number one EV brand in the United States. Any hindrance to its sales will go a long way in sending the right signals to Washington. However, the greatest reason is, in fact, because of the supply chain connecting Canada to Tesla. Critical minerals such as lithium and nickel, needed for making electric vehicle batteries, are sourced by Tesla from Canada. In the case of meter access withdrawal by Canada, Tesla production is severely hindered, not just from Canada, but from all of North America. But it gets messier. If Trump imposes tariffs, it's not only Tesla that has a problem. The entire American auto industry is in huge trouble. Ford, GM, and Chrysler all work directly with Canadian parts in building their vehicles. Many American-made cars often have engines, steel, and aluminum from Canada. A full tariff on those parts implies way higher production costs that automatically increase car prices in the US. For American buyers, that translates to thousands more dollars being based on a new car. For Canadian workers, on the other hand, the possible impacts can be disastrous, shutting down factories, mounting job losses, and the growing economy that becomes uncertain. The auto industries of both countries have been inextricably linked over decades. Hence, the kind of trade war that might ensue could bring damage to both economies as well. If Canada redirected its acquisition focus to the European market, it might be leaving the United States scurrying for new sources of supply for EV materials and auto parts. So, could it be that this is the very beginning of the most important shift away from North America for EVs? Will Tesla be the primary casualty here? There's still more to come in this fight, and the stakes didn't get any higher. Presently, in light of all the rising tensions between Canada and the US, another key player caught in the middle has been Mexico. Over 3 million vehicles are produced annually in Mexico, making it one of the biggest forces in North American auto manufacturing. But here comes a twist. Most of those vehicles have Canadian steel and aluminum in their bills of material. Mexico could see the auto industry's output slow, and jobs lost as a result of oncoming Trump tariffs that affect Canada's supply chain. Ford, GM, and Stellantis all produce cars in Mexico, but depend on parts from Canada to keep their assembly lines rolling. In the absence of Canadian parts, production costs tend to skyrocket, making vehicles even more expensive to American consumers. This is not the whole story for Canada, the US, and Mexico. With the USMCA trade agreement, which in essence replaced NAFTA, these three countries are tied together. If things fell apart in terms of trade between Canada and the US, Mexico would certainly be forced to refigure its trade strategy and perhaps look into other global partners for its essential materials. So if Trump tariffs turn the US into an unreliable trade partner, Canada would then have an alternate route through the European Union. Canada and the EU turned their trade upside down by 30% since the coming on stream of CETA, as it is referred to as the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement between Canada and the EU. The agreement again nullifies duties on critical products, making it much easier for Canada to shift exports from the US to Europe. And above all, the European Union is very interested in what Canada has to offer. The European countries are heavily investing in green energy and electric cars. But what they really need are critical minerals like lithium, nickel, and cobalt, and Canada has got them all. These materials are essential for building EV batteries, and if Canada gives them to Europe instead of the US, it can change the whole global supply chain. But it's not just minerals that Europe wants.
Recent days have seen Europe take new steps toward the commercial production of green steel that's essentially carbon neutral in production and transport. On Friday, the auto supply company ZF out of Germany struck a major deal with hydrogen producer H2 to supply green steel in the coming years.
Canada is also ramping up its green steel production, a more environmentally friendly alternative to traditional steel making. European automakers, including Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz, are eager to secure sustainable materials for their next-generation EVs. This shift could mean that, instead of relying on Tesla and other American brands, Canada's resources could fuel a European EV boom. If this happens, the American auto industry could lose a major advantage, while Europe strengthens its hold on the future of electric vehicles. With Mexico's industry at risk and Canada looking toward Europe, the future of North American auto manufacturing hangs in the balance. Could this trade war push Canada to fully break away from US auto dependence? And if so, will Tesla and other American automakers be able to survive the fallout? The answers to these questions could redefine the global auto industry for years to come. With trade tensions escalating, Canada's Plan B, trading more with the EU, sounds like a smart move. But is it really that simple?
It's the most beautiful agreement for trade that we have had since the beginning of the European Union and the European Community. I'm sure that it will be a model for the next negotiations and for the next possible agreements.
But transferring a full switch from the US to Europe has serious problems, even though Canada has already set up a trading relationship with the EU through CETA, as opposed to the US, which has a massive land border with Canada. Europe is far across the ocean. This means that shipping goods across the Atlantic will incur higher transport costs, and the delivery times will be much longer. The US market is just cheaper and faster to reach. Europe itself has very strong manufacturing of its automobiles. Major names such as BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen, Renault, and others have established themselves well in the supply chain, though Canada can provide minerals and even green steel. The chances of really high volume sales of Canadian-built vehicles and auto parts may not be as large as expected. This means that the safety and environmental standards will differ in Europe when compared to North America. That would mean that Canadian manufacturers may have to change their products just to qualify to trade in the EU, making the entire endeavor that much more expensive and complicated. Thus, the EU is an attractive alternative, but it does not completely substitute the United States. If Trump doubles down on tariffs, Canada may strengthen its ties with the EU. But Canada might not be the only one looking for new trade alliances. Mexico, which relies on Canadian steel, could also shift toward the EU, further disrupting North America's economic unity. If two of the three USMCA members start favoring Europe, the United States could be left in an isolated position. Protectionist policies may seem like a way to boost domestic industries, but if they push Canada and Mexico toward other trade partners, the US could lose a key role in the global auto supply chain. This wouldn't be the first time Trump's tariffs caused a major trade conflict. Back in 2018, he slapped high tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, and it raised hackles in Canada. The outcome? Canada retaliated with a set of tariffs against US goods, including steel, aluminum, and even consumer stuff, like whiskey and ketchup. Economic woes began to strike US households. Businesses and consumers alike were feeling the heat from increasing prices. After months of economic uncertainty and backroom negotiations, both sides struck a compromise, and the tariffs were freed eventually. But the big one arises: will history repeat itself? From what it looks like now, similar possibilities could emerge if tariff threats continue escalating. Canada could hit back with retaliation, and then, after months of pressure from businesses and consumers, both could be forced into negotiation again. At this moment, Canada is contemplating: does it still pursue access into the US market, or could it now seriously begin considering the EU? If these tariffs go into effect, it could set off an explosion that might change the entire form of global trade. Will Tesla take the biggest hit from retaliation, with swings from Canada? Will the North American auto industry experience disruption that is permanent? Or will both sides fold before the situation gets out of hand? One thing is for certain: the future of Canada-US trade is hanging by a thread. Do you believe Canada should stick with the US or focus on the EU instead? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more updates on this ongoing trade war.